Wow, my beautiful house is finally done. Time to decorate the inside. To many people, doing interiors is the most daunting part of making a Minecraft build, but what if I told you that interiors aren't actually hard, you're just not doing it right? And I know that because you clicked on this video. But thankfully that's about to change, since this won't be a step-by-step tutorial that explains how to build one thing, but rather a comprehensive vanilla-friendly guide on how to build good interiors in general, so you can apply everything I'm about to talk to any style and any room with any kind of function. This is the ultimate guide to interiors in Minecraft building. First up, inspiration and vibes. The first thing you want to do when making an interior is picking a vibe and committing to it. It's nice to know what you're going for very early on in the building process, because all of the creative choices you're going to make are going to be strongly influenced by your theme, and lacking a theme can lead to things not feeling like they belong. Like here, for example, I have a living room that also doubles as a brewing room. The combination of the typical colorless Scandinavian style and a cauldron and some of these other details looks ridiculous. Now, if I simply take these details and place them in another context, we suddenly have an atmospheric, mysterious potion brewing room. It's absolutely possible to build without a theme in mind, it's just that building with one makes achieving cohesion way easier. Inspiration for your theme can be found anywhere and in anything, so I implore you to think beyond just pictures of interiors in Minecraft or real life. Inspiration can be a song, a movie, art, books, something in nature, and anything else. But for picture inspiration, I recommend using Pinterest, as it's the best way to store all of your stuff, and it's also possible to turn off AI photos. You just gotta go to options, refine your recommendations, Gen I interests, and make sure they're turned off. You can also type before 2023 if you want to use Google, as this eliminates basically all of the AI photos, or at least the advanced ones. As a detail-oriented person, I don't love using AI as inspiration, as it's really difficult to discern the details in some of those pictures. But whatever you use as your inspiration doesn't matter as long as it fulfills its purpose, to inspire you. Try to have a good understanding of the vibe, theme, and purpose of the place you're making, as well as the people who use it, and look at the entire process of making an interior as visual storytelling. Now onto planning. First things first, decide how tall each floor is going to be, and the height of the floors should match the style and scale you're going for, because a cozy cabin and the majestic castle do not have the same floor heights. Taller floors are great for making you feel small and like you're in the presence of something bigger than yourself. Think like churches, libraries, castles, and anything else you want to feel grand and breathtaking. And lower roofs are great for making things feel cozy, homely, and safe. Most of the examples I've shown so far have been relatively small in scale, 1:1 or slightly bigger than that to be more precise, as I do take some creative liberties to make things look better. For some context, one block in Minecraft is supposed to be 1 meter. This isn't necessarily the case though, as the mountains in the game, for example, are like 200 meters tall. What is this, Denmark? We never really think about this though, as the appearances of things matter way more than the number math stuff, and sometimes slightly exaggerating measurements to preserve the likeness of something is just a form of stylization. A chair with these proportions would be ridiculous in real life, but great thing this isn't real life though. Minecraft scale stuff is already very stylized, so don't be afraid to get creative with it too. There are no rules, except for one. No matter what you do not make your roofs only 2 blocks tall. It'll seriously look like shit even if you're being extremely space efficient or building on a small scale. If you do this, no wonder why your interiors are so abominable. You'll probably need to watch this video thrice to let everything sink in. I usually make my roofs at least 2.5 blocks tall, but most of the time they're 4 or 5 blocks or taller than that, even when I want something to feel cozy or compact. Another thing that you might want to do in the planning stage is to make the walls more than 1 block wide. This lets you change the color of the walls and add lots of depth and more detail with things like bookshelves, aquariums, and other furniture built into the walls without having any of it affect the exterior. If your build uses entire glass blocks as windows because glass panes wouldn't fit, you might even want to go 3 blocks wide. This lets you shape the windows on the inside as well, though this is usually more common in builds that are big, either in size or in scale. You can also change the color of the floors and roofs by just making them 2 blocks thick, or alternatively you can use slabs or trapdoors to keep it thin. But if you know you'll be building into the walls, floors, or roofs of a build, you should include this in the planning of the exterior, as adding many layers of walls or floors can affect the symmetry and balance of things like windows. So now that you've got your floors made, you need to decide where the different rooms and the staircase are going to be. There are actually many different shapes and types of staircases, and knowing what these are called makes finding inspiration way easier. So now I'm gonna show you some different types of staircases and talk about which styles they suit and which they don't. First up, we have a straight staircase. This is basically just a line of stairs. It's not the most space efficient, but I've tried to include some storage under grander here. Here we have a straight staircase that's also floating. Floating staircases don't have risers, which are the vertical parts of steps. Here we have an L-shaped staircase. These are shaped like L's. Really practical for corners. Also a bit more visually interesting than the boring, bland, straight ones. This is a U-shaped staircase. It's shaped like a U. Here in the design, I was kind of going for a messy stairway up to an apartment. And this is a 3/4 turn staircase. This kind of staircase has a 90-degree turn at all of its landings, and the landing is a platform in between the bottom and top of the stair. This also looks awesome. Okay, I just want to flex for a second. Alright, just fucking look at this. Wow.
It's amazing.
Fantastic. This is also a type of open well staircase, which is a staircase that has an opening in the middle, which basically forms this well, but I've chosen to fill it up with this aquarium. This is a ladder staircase, and this looks ladder-like from its steepness, and it's great for small spaces like lofts, for example. Here we have a spiral-shaped staircase. These are often found in castles, but they can also be modern. There are a couple of ways you can go about making these 2-block wide ones. One of them is like this, 2 blocks and then 1 heart, no, not fucking blocks, I mean slabs. 2 slabs, then 1 heart. But you can also place the slab like this. You see the one that connects right into the pole? I destroy one of the blocks and then place it like this. This gives off more of a round effect. We have a circular staircase, and this follows a circular shape. It has an open well, which I filled with plants and this fancy chandelier. It can create some really nice modern looks and can be a cool focal point. This is a curved staircase, and the term curved staircase refers to all kinds of staircases that are curved. As you can see, this looks really awkward, and the furniture placement also just awkward. It's hard to make these look small, but if you're making something bigger, definitely go for it. This is a double staircase, and double staircases have 2 flights in any shape that connect to one landing. Here they happen to be L-shaped, and the symmetry in these kinds of staircases can make a space feel orderly and imposing, which I definitely think suits this theme, as it's supposed to be an evil lab. You see, computer stuff and evil hacker stuff, they're breaking firewalls. Last one is a bifurcated staircase. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, but honestly, I do not care. This is a kind of staircase that splits into 2 separate flights. These top flights are typically slimmer than the bottom flight, but here I did not go with that. You can also curve the bottom flight outwards for an extra dramatic look. This is fantastic for grand entrances and castles and other sorts of fancy things. And here I've went with a castle. You can also get creative with the railings. Some suggestions for blocks you can use are full blocks, stairs, fences, glass panes, leaves, anvils, walls, lecterns, azaleas, and you can place carpets, trapdoors, and pressure plates on all these, and also trapdoors, signs, shelves, paintings, item frames, and banners. When planning, you also gotta think as if gravity exists, so you might want to include things like pillars, beams, and other things that look like they provide support. First, we'll be looking at some pillar examples. None of these are based on specific architectural styles, and if you're making something that's historical, go find some references. Okay, first up we have this quartz pillar. This uses the pillar block and it has a shelf on the bottom and the top. Looks really nice. Here we have a kind of rustic design. This uses shelves, trapdoors, and signs. And this third one uses walls, so it's extra skinny. But if you debug stick this to all different sides in all different directions, you get one that's basically circular. Here we have one that uses decorated pots. Here we have one with anvils. This one's really ostentatious and gaudy, but using armor stands in this way gives you many options and many different blocks to work with. Bamboo trapdoors and buttons and everything bamboo can be used as a gold replacement. Looks really nice. And this last one is really huge. It's basically just a plus sign with the walls on the sides to round it off. I've used shelves on the bottom and the top to also round it off. Now over to the examples of the beams. There are many different ways you can use beams in your designs, and first up we have logs. This allows you to texture, so if you're going for something older, this could definitely be an option. Here we have one with signs. This is more elegant and delicate, and you just gotta shift while right clicking on a sign to place one next to it. Here we have slabs. This is not too interesting. Shelves, however, are a bit more interesting. You can also use the functionality in the shelves to add some more detail. Trapdoors, not too interesting either. But here I have mixed different things together to create this really fancy looking interesting roof. Some rooms are obviously going to be bigger than others, like the living room if you're making a house for example, but the exact layout is up to you and it can vary a lot depending on what you're making and who it's for. Like you might have a smaller bathroom but a massive bedroom, or the other way around. So just mark where the different rooms are going to go in some sort of way. I like to use different colors for this to properly show where stuff is gonna go, but not all rooms need to be separated by walls though. And no, I'm not talking about those very open floor plans that look extremely airy. If you like these, you have no soul. Sometimes breaking a floor into rooms isn't about physically creating walls, but making something that breaks the visual consistency to let you know you're in another room. So think creating partitions, an arch, changing the pattern of the floor, or the color of the walls. So in 4 simple steps, we went from one huge room to an entrance, living area, and kitchen. You can also separate rooms without any of these with changes in aesthetics, interior, and details only. Like this home office and bedroom together, for example. The bedroom part feels like a place you'd actually want to fall asleep in, while the office part feels soulless and hospital-ish. When planning, it can help to look at reference images to get a rough idea of room sizes and layouts for what's typical for what you're trying to build. But honestly, you don't need to overthink it. Everyone watching this has probably been inside of a house before, especially you. I know you never go outside. Now, if planning and stuff still is something you're just absolutely terrible at, just make the interior first. Here's this castle's dining hall on the inside, and this is the outside. And I'm going to be transforming this into a beautiful castle, but only this side though, not that because I'm lazy. I think stuff doesn't really matter as long as I'm able to properly shape the windows on. This part sticking out here looks kind of out some... honestly think a gradient would improve this, so I'm just going to add a gradient from Deep Slate Tombstone. It still feels a bit too plain, like I don't know. I'm onto something. I don't even know what I'm doing right now. Alright, fuck it. I'm just going to add a third arch. Yippee! I do think this needs some variation in texture, like everything's just wrecked. So I'm going to add some polished andesite, tough, and deep slate. And I think this is finished by now. It's definitely not the best castle mankind's ever seen, but it's a castle, and with an inside this gorgeous, the outside really doesn't matter. Just ignore the back. Black palettes, texturing, and gradients. The colors of the walls, floors, and roof are basically the foundation for everything that comes after it. Yet many people don't think things through in this step and end up with something really monotonous looking. So now I'm gonna walk you through a few things that can make your walls actually look nice, because come on, you're better than this. First off, block palettes. When you're making your block palette, you should ideally have different blocks for the different surfaces. So the floor block isn't the same as the wall block, and the wall block isn't the same as the roof block. This isn't a rule you have to follow though, as this varies across styles, and most of the time I don't even do it myself. But as a general rule, if you struggle with making things interesting, it works. Now, how do you choose the blocks in your block? No. Before I talk about how to actually choose the blocks in your block palette, let's talk about the things you should include in your block palette. Any big gradients or texturing should be included in the block palette. More subtle gradients are easy to just make along the way, but the big ones can drastically change the look of something, so they're good to include. If you're going to add a wainscoting, which is those trims that you see on walls that nobody really knows the name of, you should include that in the block palette too. And wallpapers should be included in the block palette as well. Also, please just make more wallpapers. Wallpapers are so underrated, they look gorgeous, and yet people don't make them. It's sad to see. And oh, random wallpaper trick. Use invisible item frames. They can make for some really interesting looks. Like this cutesy bedroom with a floral wallpaper. This is just adorable, and the wallpaper just adds it. You can also place the item frames behind the banners, which looks nice. For this dark and mysterious living room, this feels evil, like I'm not supposed to be here. And I've used wither roses in these wallpapers. For this bright and colorful living room with an accent wall, I feel like this definitely belongs to an avocado toast vegan. You know, that genre of person. Now, when it comes to actually choosing the block for the block palette, it's very straightforward and in my opinion often overcomplicated. Simply choose blocks that match the colors and textures you often see in your inspiration. Like if these were my inspiration photos, a block palette like this would work. The names of the surfaces and materials and stuff doesn't necessarily need to match though, as blocks aren't their names, they're only what they look like. Like a hay bale can be a musty carpet if placed in the right context. Once you have a solid block palette that reflects the vibe of your inspiration, you can add whatever whatever you want to it to make it unique. You don't need to think about the colors of the furniture just yet, but it can be nice to have in mind in case you want an accent wall that matches a piece of furniture or something. You're also going to need different block palettes for rooms that serve different purposes. A kitchen's block palette won't be the same as a living room's block palette or a bathroom's block palette. And one really underrated way to make block palettes unique is functional blocks. These blocks typically aren't thought of as building blocks as they all serve some kind of function. Well, maybe not all of them, but if we look at the bottoms, sides, or tops of these blocks, many of them have unique textures that are great for building and texturing. Take a look at this cozy living room. Looks normal, right? Well, the floor is upside down barrels, chiseled bookshelves and beehives, the wainscoting is looms, and the roof is made of composters and bee nests. From the outside, it looks ridiculous, so make sure to think about whether you're going to use functional blocks in the planning part. Or look at this kitchen. This also looks really charming and really normal. But the floor has blast furnaces, smithing tables and furnaces, and the roof is made of stone cutters and lodestones. Just beautiful. So make sure to mess around with the functional blocks and look at the textures on all the sides. Now it's about time that we talk about another important aspect of creating a block palette: texturing and gradients. First, what's texturing? Texturing is using a variation of blocks to imply something isn't smooth or flat. It can be separated into two categories: block mixes, which are similar blocks mixed together randomly, and gradients, which are smooth transitions between blocks. You can use these by themselves or combine them to create something like this. Block mixes are generally more stylized when it comes to texturing, while gradients are more realistic. For example, let's say we have a floor in some historical place that's been walked on for hundreds of years. In the block mix way of texturing, you can tell the floor is old. This is through the blocks used and how they show imperfections. In the more gradient-like way of texturing, you can tell the floor is old, but you can also tell where people have walked the most over the years. I know some people like to shit on the block mix way of texturing because they think that realism good, stylization bad, but one isn't necessarily better than the other. They're just different and good in their own ways. Even though texturing usually refers to implied texture, texturing can also be creating physical variation in surfaces with slabs, stairs, trapdoors, walls, buttons, and so on. This, when combined with normal flat texturing, can create some really interesting looks. So I made the floor spruce in this example just because it's the easiest block to texture, or the easiest wood at least, because it has so many similar looking blocks in terms of both texture, value, and color. So this uses oak logs, spruce trapdoors, barrels, stripped spruce log, and then the spruce stairs, as well as buttons and pressure plates. And then the walls are made of moss, mossy cobblestone, mossy stone bricks, and then andesite. And the roof also has a more subtle gradient from polished deep slate to polished tuff with blast furnaces in between. This is also a great example of just incorporating functional blocks in the most random places. I love summoning demons. When adding texture to your interiors, there are a few things you should consider. Age. You gotta texture according to how old something is. Older interiors will generally look more crusty, while new interiors tend to have smooth and uniform looks, so make sure you choose blocks that reflect this. But keep in mind that older interiors can be well maintained and newer ones can be neglected, which all depends on the backstory. Exposure to things that stain. Blocks exposed to different things that can damage how something looks should be considered. So think like water stains, paint spills, or old blood stains if something bad's happened in the place. This is literally real footage of my room. I'm forced to mix colors with acrylics. Foot traffic. Parts of floors that have been walked on more should show that. This can be through cracks, darker areas, or something like peeling paint if it's a wooden floor. If this in particular interests you, I made a video on gradients in roads and storytelling that you might want to watch. Watch it, your brain craves my content. So texturing can kind of work as visual storytelling, which I'll talk more about in the storytelling part. Okay, now on to gradients. A gradient is a smooth... Wait, didn't you just talk about gradients? Yeah? Gradients can be a type of texturing, but they aren't always texturing. Oftentimes, gradients are just smooth transitions from one block to another. The transition from one block to another can be used to create texture, but it can also be to create a gradient between two or more colors. Wow, unbelievable. This could simply be a colorful gradient wallpaper, for example. I like to look at it like this. Texturing isn't always gradient, and gradients aren't always texturing. There's overlap between them, and they can be used for very similar reasons. So on to the gradients that aren't texturing. So yeah, gradients are good for just making things look nicer. And if you want to draw the eyes towards a certain area, gradients can do that too. This can be towards the top, the bottom, or a certain spot. Gradients can also be used to make things stand out through contrast in color or value. For example, here we have a wall with arches that are the same block as the wall. Disastrous, I know. It looks alright, but simply adding a gradient with some contrast to the wall really brings the arches out. You can also spice it up by not limiting yourself to normal gradients. You can make them round, make them wavy, and mess around with different directions. In case you need some inspiration or just don't know where to start, here are 30 different gradients I really like with their block names. And if you're wondering how I made these, just watch the first 5 minutes and 16 seconds of this video. And now, time to furnish! I am going to bomb. Yeah. This is a prime example of what happens when you try to lay out the furniture without thinking about visual weight and space. Visual weight is how attention grabbing something is, or how heavy it is on the eyes. Look at these blocks. What do you notice first? Probably this purple block down here. Yellow and purple are complementary colors, so they have a high contrast in hue. They also contrast a lot in value, which is how light or dark something is regardless of its color. So we can say this purple block has a high visual weight when placed in the context of these yellow blocks. Now, if we place this purple block amongst blues, it doesn't stand out just as much. Blue and purple are much closer in hue and closer in value as well. So since the contrasts are lower here, the purple's visual weight isn't as high. So we can say the visual weight of an object is relative to the objects around it. Color and value aren't the only ways something can have a high visual weight though. Shape, size, and detail can also do this. While these examples are vastly different, the thing present in all of them is contrast. While contrasting objects can be described as visually heavy, compositions in general can also be described as visually heavy, like this interior compared to this interior. The room on the left is much lower in contrast in color, value, shape, size, and detail, while the room on the right is the opposite, so there's much more to visually process in this one than in that one. An important thing to note about visual weight that I don't really feel like anyone mentions is that visual weight can in many ways be subjective, as different things will be attention grabbing for different people. 3 people look at this entrance and person 1 thinks the door area is the visually heaviest because they hate acacia wood. Person 2 thinks the window area is the heaviest because of how the window isn't centered and they're obsessed with symmetry. Person 3 thinks the sunflowers are the visually heaviest because they just love sunflowers. Culture can also influence how one thinks of visual weight. I'm personally more likely to accept asymmetry on the left side because I read from the left, so that's where my eyes naturally fall when I look at something. So yeah, you can consciously direct people's eyes towards places with visually heavy things, but that, like many other things in art, has a degree of subjectivity to it. When you use visual weight consciously in your interiors, you're able to create balance, or the lack thereof. So it's very important that how you use visual weight aligns with both what you're making and the style you're going for. And what I mean by that, I'll show you with these examples. Art museum. In an art museum, it's important that the artworks stand out, so they should be the visually heaviest. And everything but the art should be visually light and preferably contribute to making the artworks the focus. So think seating spaces to look at the art and lights directed at the art. These lights are bamboo buttons with the invisible light block under to act as small lights, but if you're in survival and want paintings to be lit up, just place some sort of light source behind them. The huge size of the blank spaces between the paintings also increases the visual weight of them because they create the contrast between the bland and undetailed walls and the detailed paintings. Fancy living room. This is supposed to be one of the many fancy living rooms in a mansion, and it's very open and very tall. When a space this huge is being decorated, we gotta be whatever the opposite of space efficient is. So instead of placing the couches up against the walls, they're placed in the middle of the room, which gives the middle of a room a high visual weight. If I remove the chandelier, a focal point this far down in the room this tall would create an imbalance in how the visual weight is distributed. But no, thankfully the chandelier is here to bring the visual weight higher up and make it look more intentional. Airy living room. This is an example of how using visual weight deliberately isn't always to make something look good. This is a very badly furnished living room, and the visual weight and balance in this is... There's nothing on the walls, so the ugly furniture really becomes the focus of attention, for better or for worse, because the walls are really musty after all. Having a few awkwardly placed pieces of furniture as the visually heaviest thing, strangely enough, works in this context, as we can tell it's intentionally bad, which is important. Visual weight and balance and all that can seem very abstract, but there are a few concrete ways you can match it with the vibe or style you're going for, and they are symmetry. Symmetry can be used to make something feel stable, organized, and even formal, so this would be good for something that's meant to be perceived as serious and still have a sense of calm, like a place of worship, for example. But in most contexts, symmetry, unless kept very minimal, can make things feel boring and repetitive. Though this depends on the style in question, as interior styles like Art Deco, for example, use lots of symmetry. But in my opinion, the look of symmetry can also be a bit jarring and liminal, so watch out for that. Asymmetry. Asymmetry can be used to make something feel more dynamic, lived in, or messy. It lets you have more unique, visually heavy things, as you don't need to worry about them being on the other side too. Asymmetry symmetry can also make a room feel more spacious, and let me explain what I mean by that. If I place these 6 blocks symmetrically, the brain groups them together into 2 bigger objects comprising 3 blocks each. But if I place them asymmetrically, they're now perceived as 6 individual objects, which thereby makes the space seem bigger, because more objects, more space for objects. And I can make the objects feel even more individual by changing something else, like the color for example too. Now back to the performative male gathering spot-esque cafe. The seats and tables in this place cover a total of 34 blocks without much symmetry apart from these 2 couches. But if I take those same 34-ish blocks and place them in a very symmetrical layout, the place immediately feels cramped and I don't know, just weird. But this is also subjective, so I might just be really quirky and special. Repetition. Repetition is something I like to separate into 2 categories, regular repetition and irregular repetition. First, I'm going to talk about regular repetition. Regular repetition is repetition that is regular. Duh! Or in other words, consistent repetition that isn't scattered in different places. So think patterns, paintings lined up, a long table with chairs, and so on. Much like with symmetry, this provides a sense of calm and can make something feel stable. This can also create an interesting contrast if combined with something less organized, like repeating arches surrounded by lots of mess. Irregular repetition. Irregular repetition is repetition that's distributed in different places. This can be placing the same decorative object in different places, having touches of one signature color scattered around, and anything else that repeats in different places without following a rhythm. This is great for making things cohesive, as you'll get touches of the same thing everywhere, and you've probably noticed, but all the messy things in this classroom are repeated somewhere. If you're furnishing a house or something, you can even use the same thing throughout all the different rooms to create this feeling of unity. Compact spaces. If you want to make something that feels homely, compactness is the way to go. And by compactness, I don't necessarily mean compromising on size, but rather minimizing the empty space on the floor and on the walls. You can do this in a way that feels cozy, but you can also use it to make something claustrophobic like this. And whether a compact space is claustrophobic or cozy is not only contingent on size, also vibes. Like, look at what happens when I change the atmosphere of this room. All of a sudden it's cozy and nice. Open spaces. Open spaces are great for making things feel more airy, luxurious, and expensive, especially if there's natural light in what you're making. Having open spaces in your interior doesn't mean there should be bald spots everywhere though, because fun fact, you're allowed to decorate. With open spaces, it's important to be deliberate in how you use visual weight so you don't end up with this classic atrocity. But you can also use it to make something feel empty and liminal, as long as we can see the intentionality behind it, unlike with this. Now you just gotta plan where things are going to go, and there's no best way to go about this as it varies from person to person. I personally go straight into building the pieces of furniture when I'm making something smaller or more compact, but when decorating big or open rooms, I like to plan things out with placeholder blocks. Like, how are you supposed to plan where things are gonna go when you don't know what to include in the room? Furniture. What you furnish a room with depends on the room's purpose, obviously. So ask yourself what a room is used for and what furniture matches that purpose. But it can be really hard to know where to start with this, especially if you aren't used to thinking beyond functionality. And since most interiors made in Minecraft are in houses, castles, and other similar buildings, I made this mention with 171 different items, decorations, and pieces of furniture you can include to fill in the space that isn't occupied by function. And sorry to all the people who aren't making houses who are watching this, you can maybe just skip to the timestamp on the screen. Anyway, let's head inside. Pookie Bear. Entrance. Closet, potted plants, shoe shelf, lobby seating, indoor garden, fancy candle holders. Living room. A tree for some weird fucking reason, armchair, bird cage, hanging plant, bookshelf, cat tower, dog bed, food bowls, lamp with a lampshade, TV stand, speakers, couch, coffee table, TV remote, rug, fireplace, firewood, aquarium, game room. Chessboard, pool table, table tennis table, Dance Dance Revolution machine thing or whatever they're called, vending machine, dining room, dining table, dining chairs, plates, fork, spoon, good soup, lanterns, cups, pedestal, statue, piano, bar stools, barrel tap, alcoholic beverages, kitchen, dishwashers, ovens, microwave, cupboards, bag of coffee beans, stove, counter, knife, sink, sponge, refrigerator, kitchen island, toaster, food, drawers, wood fire oven, shelves, pantry, food shelf, boxes, hallway, chandelier, fancy rug, grandfather clock, paintings, map, library, tall bookshelves, book and quill, books, candles, bathroom rug, shower, bathtub, soap and shampoo bottles, toilet, paper dispenser, toilet brush, litter box, mirror, soap bar, soap dish, towels, trash, office, desk, laptop, calendar, desk light, office chair, floating shelf, to-do list, clock, printer, the first bedroom, nail polish shelf, nail polish, vanity, makeup brush, fairy lights, double bed, neon sign, walk-in closet, clothing display, small couch, curtains, clothing hooks, bedroom 2. Glass table, gaming setup, stationary computer, decorative sword, phone, LED light, bunk bed, bedroom 3. Posters, twin-sized bed, pillows, easel, crumbled paper, art desk, paper, pencil, brushes, bong, scissors, empty canvases, crystals, fursuits, alarm, bug, music discs, and a vacuum. Music room. Drum kit, jukebox, microphone and microphone stand, grand piano, organ. Sensory room. Trampoline, swing, interactive buttons, pole, water things. Theater room. Snack bar, popcorn machine, huge screen, movie seats. Gym. Yoga mats, water bottles, bench press, punching bag, treadmill, rock climbing wall, pool room, lounge chairs, diving board, pool, of course, sauna, coal pit, benches, steam, water bucket, spade, wine cellar, wine storage shelves, wine jars, wine barrels, spilled wine, torture chamber, scaphism, chains, water torture, sleep deprivation device, bamboo torture, blood, slicing chair, tools, electric chair. One thing you might have noticed if you've watched some of my previous videos is that some of these designs have been shown before and here they're simply being reused, but in another context. Chances are you own a piece of IKEA furniture. IKEA. But have you ever thought about how so many people have IKEA furniture in their homes, yet people's homes can look wildly different? Well, that is because of assets. Much like in game design, assets in Minecraft building refers to individual designs and objects you can reuse in different contexts. I have this potted plant right here, and here's another one, except it's slightly tweaked. And here I have yet another one with a few more changes. For each potted plant, I'm not making up an entirely new design, but simply slightly tweaking a pre-existing one. I like to group the different ways you can change singular pieces of furniture in 3 different ways: shape, color, and detail or texture. This is so ugly. And if you change something enough, you'll eventually end up with a completely new design. How cool! Just kidding, this is fucking adorable and I'm gonna quit building forever. I'm sure you've seen step-by-step tutorials on how to build furniture before, and there are some cool assets out there, like this functional toaster that I came across while browsing YouTube a few years ago. It's made by B-Blocks and it's extremely cool, and I've been including it in many of my kitchen builds ever since. But you shouldn't rely exclusively on tutorials to get good asset designs. If you learn how to make original designs yourself, you can make your interiors truly stand out, and you can also make things for hyper-specific situations. Like if I'm making one of those pedicure chairs for a nail salon, for example, I can't just look up a tutorial for that, and that's when knowing how to make pieces of furniture yourself comes in handy. Minecraft is a blocky game, a very blocky game, and a big part of making furniture and items is recognizing different shapes and placing them together to create new objects. But what shapes are there to recognize if the only shapes I can recognize are squares and rectangles? Well, before I answer that stupid fucking question, we need to have a quick chat about shapes. Most people, when they hear the word shapes, think of geometric shapes. Geometric shapes are the mathematically created shapes, so squares, rectangles, triangles, circles, and the different ones. I'm gonna be honest, I'm not qualified to speak on this subject because I don't know what the different shapes are called. Okay, pretend I never said this and let's move on. Making pieces of furniture that have geometric shapes is easy considering Minecraft's blocky nature, except for triangles, obviously, and maybe circles too, but only if your skill is shit. You don't really need to think hard to piece geometrically shaped thing 1 together with geometrically shaped thing 2, then 3 and 4 to make thing that is meant to be geometrically shaped in real life too. But if we're being realistic, not all furniture is geometrically shaped. Maybe a hard chair, but a soft couch will have rounded, uneven edges that we won't be able to replicate in Minecraft. Or will we? Well, now it's time that we talk about organic shapes. Organic shapes are irregular, asymmetrical, and don't follow any rules, such as this one, and the other different ones. We often see these shapes in nature, hence their organic name. Here's a picture of nature for some context. We don't see organic shapes in furniture as much as we see geometric shapes, apart from rounded off edges on a smaller scale, things with fabric, and the occasional living tower type of thing. Please subscribe so I can become rich. Please, I need this. But since Minecraft is such a geometrical, square and rectangle shaped game, how are we then supposed to get organic shapes, circles, and so on? Well, this is a block. Very much square, but here is a block placed next to other blocks to make a circle. Or actually, it isn't actually a circle, it's just many different squares placed together to imply it's a circle. Imply. Here's my cat, three-dimensionally slaying in his hot pink boots. Except that it's actually 2D. My whole life's been a lie. I'm gonna see you. And there isn't actually shadow underneath him, it's just
oil paint.
A lot in art is implied, and if we want something in Minecraft to have rounded off organic edges, we simply gotta imply. As an example, let's transform this very geometrically shaped couch into one with softer rounded edges through implying. I start by removing a couple of slabs to create a rounded off shape, then I replace them with trapdoors to make that transition even smoother, and place a couple more on the sides to get this small round edge, and signs on these sides creates a similar rounded off illusion. A look at the before, ew, so square, not organic at all, abominable. And the after, wow, so organic, beautiful. Geometric and organic shapes can be combined to create new shapes, and interesting contrasts between the organic and geometric, like this artwork that I made, for example. Now let's take a look at how this can look in furniture making. Here we have an organically shaped, somewhat abstract couch thing for people that hate looking at each other. If I sharpen a couple of the rounded edges, we get a couch that is both organic and geometric in its shapes. And if I sharpen it up even further, we now have a fully geometric couch. Implied shape in Minecraft building is also heavily context-based. The same block can imply different things, like here the stair block is supposed to be smooth, and here it's supposed to be a stair, purely based on context. You can subtract shapes from other shapes to create furniture, and add shapes to other shapes. And here, for example, I've done both, and this, while it might seem simple, can get you really far. Shapes aren't the only things you can imply though, you can also imply detail. A lot of a detail's quality comes from its surroundings. Here this is an armor stand, and here it's a vacuum. The detail didn't change whatsoever, only the context did. And same with this. Here it's a pool ball, and here it's a jar of acrylic powder for nails. So it's much more important to have a good context than it is to have a good detail. You can also imply detail through textures found in noisy blocks. A common example of this is those fruit and vegetable barrels made with trapdoors, and I'm actually so obsessed with these, but let's get a bit more niche. If I'm making something with a lot of ornament, like this clock for example, I won't be able to replicate it through just placing typical details, like no amount of invisible item frames can save me here, but I can use texture to imply stuff. So first up, the shape of the actual clock. I think dark oak would be great for this. Also the shelf block. And I'm going to make this 4 blocks tall. I could use walls and have it scale accurate, but it would be weird considering the amount of detail that this is going to have. I think I'm also going to add one shelf here so that I can detail this with the functionality of the shelf. And now for the middle of the clock. I think I will use trapdoors on the sides so that I can place full blocks in the middle without having anything visible on these sides. Now I am looking for a very noisy yellow block, like maybe yellow glazed terracotta, but I'm also thinking raw gold, like this, and then with skulk vein on top. I don't know, does this look better or that? I feel like this has lighter values towards the bottom left, so maybe I'm just going to go with raw gold. For the top, it again goes out a bit like this. I am going to use the shelves. I don't know exactly what I'm going to do for the clock. Maybe I could use some yellow terracotta, like so. Or maybe I could use the terracotta hair like that. I'm just going to finish up the top of this with an oak slab, and this clock has these spire looking things on the sides, so I am going to use some invisible item frames and see what I could do with something like the waxed exposed chains, for example. Ooh, okay, that is actually something. I'm also going to add one across the slab just for some additional detail. Now for the details on the bottom and the sides right here, I think I'm going to use some banners. I think I'm going to go with a couple of white banners on these sides, and on the bottoms here, a banner pattern maybe, and some orange dye. Hopefully that will look good. Spoiler alert, it didn't. On the bottom of the front, there's a lot going on, so I am honestly just going to make some gradient banner like this. It's not the best, but it works. Okay, look at that. Look at that! This by itself looks pretty weird, but if I change the context to something more fitting, it just makes sense. Like previously stated, a good context is much more important than a good detail. When I decide specifically what to make for an interior, I always go back to the inspiration I chose in the beginning. And when I derive inspiration for furniture from pictures, it's either through vibes or detail. And I'm gonna use my room as an example of these two methods, because recreating this room in Minecraft exactly would almost be impossible, or I'd at least have to spend days making map art of all the wacky shit on my walls, which I'm not gonna do because I'm not unemployed. I'm totally not unemployed, trust me. So first up, inspiration through vibes. Inspiration through vibes is about copying the general vibe of something, which I'd say here is artsy, somewhat chaotic, pink, imbued with Tylenol, anti-big light, and high screen time. I would then find blocks that match this vibe and make something out of it. And I wanted to make this as small in scale as I could while still keeping it proportionate, but I still couldn't build in 1:1 scale because my real life room is about 2.5 meters tall, but that would look horrendous in game, and even rounding it up to 3 blocks would look bad. In real life, my monitor doesn't take up 2/3 of my wall, and the room height, although accurate, would preclude other things in the room from looking proportionate. Anyway, here's how this turned out. It perfectly reflects the vibe of my room, and I have 0 of these things in my real life room, except for this one and this one, but the vibe is still very much present. Inspiration through detail. Inspiration through detail is about copying the specific things, so as an example here, I'll use my desk and chair. When making this, I tried to get it as proportional as humanly possible, so I scaled it up, because the bigger you build, the easier it is to make stuff proportionate and detailed. The scale of this is roughly 2:1, so you honestly just gotta ask yourself whether you want to sacrifice player-friendly scale for proportionality. At its core, a lot of Minecraft interior making decisions are just about holistic harmony. Like, I was thinking of making the drawer holes with these black squares that I see everywhere, so I could have 5 of them on each side, but I thought it looked hideous, so I decided against it. Anyway, here is the banner I used for the monitor, by the way. Go make it. It looks beautiful. I'm really happy with how this turned out, and if you copy enough things, you'll eventually end up with a replica of what you're inspired by, but then you also have to build bigger. But to be honest, a lot of furniture making is just messing around and seeing what works. Every beautiful creation has its "this is horrendous bomb it ASAP" stage, and in my opinion, the best things are made when you aren't afraid to be experimental with wacky shapes and use blocks you'd never think of as furniture blocks, like this table and carpet made of bamboo and moss. When it comes to actually furnishing, make sure the furniture and decorations you used match the scale you chose while planning and are somewhat consistent in scale. This chair is cute, this table is also cute, but together it's the worst thing you've ever seen. It just has to look proportionate, the numbers don't really matter that much. Make sure the color palette of the furniture pieces looks cohesive, or don't, depending on your style. It's a bit like visual weight. It's alright that it's bad if it's being bad is part of the style. You can honestly do anything as long as you're able to justify it as a stylistic choice. The person who lives here happens to be colorblind, but be careful with using colors that don't show up that much in your inspiration photos. And make sure there's a bit of contrast and value in the colors you choose. You can discern value by squinting your eyes or putting a black and white filter over what you're making and seeing if it looks monotonous or not. And please remember to think about visual weight too when you decide where stuff is gonna go. As always, I know I've said this a million times, but make sure your creative decisions align with your style. This is really important because otherwise you'll end up with something. Storytelling, also known as detailing, but I prefer calling it storytelling, as I feel like the word detailing leaves out the core part of it, telling stories. While storytelling is telling stories through cohesive details, detailing is simply placing details. Like, have you ever seen those celebrity house tours where all the decorations just look out of place and like they just lack soul? Come on in! So yeah, this is my bill of limes. I'm like so obsessed with citrus fruits. That's kind of how I feel about interiors without the backstory. If you're making something in survival though, you can choose to skip this step as the story kinda writes itself as you play. Like, this is my room on the server I play on. The details aren't exactly carefully curated, thoroughly thought through creative choices, they just ended up here, I don't know. When you give your interiors a backstory, you can make it before as part of the planning or develop it as you're building, or a combination of both, which is what I usually do. There are some pros to planning out the backstory before though, as it'll influence all the steps you do after the planning. Everything from the texturing to how visual weight is used will be influenced by a place's identity and story. As an example of what I mean when I say storytelling through cohesive details, let's take a look at how this living room visually changes when the story changes. The person who lives here is a plant-loving man who's recently moved in and feels a bit lonely sometimes. So to cope with that, he gets himself a cat that eventually knocks down all his plants. But it's getting better, he's reading more and feels ready to go out and meet people. And that he does. Suddenly he's having a romantic date with a girl in his living living room. The date went well. Some time goes by and he and this other person are celebrating their anniversary. His girlfriends made him some paintings and they're obviously yellow for an amazing reason. They decide to birth 6 more cats and they need more space, so they just abandon their apartment, which doesn't receive any upkeep, so it ends up really musty. The end. Okay, so that's certainly a story, but did you notice just how much the details communicated things that were left unsaid? You might not have noticed that when he got the cat, only the plants that are toxic to cats disappeared, and he eventually moved his only plant left to a cat-safe spot. Or that its bookshelf was gradually filled with more books, apart from when it came to the date night where it suddenly became almost full. The dining table just spawned for the date too, and then disappeared. Their anniversary cake was on the other table, so he clearly didn't genuinely need that table. Based on all this, we can assume this guy cares about impressing his girlfriend. I mean, performatively filling the bookshelves up with books and buying a table you're only gonna use once for a date? Alright. He probably really loves her, but we can tell he got comfortable around her at some point by the fact that the impressed girlfriend table disappeared. And he also loves his cat. He cares about his cat's safety, and he clearly doesn't mind getting his hobby stuff ruined. Having a backstory confines you to the one story and only that, which makes decorating way less overwhelming. If you don't know where to start, ask yourself these questions. What is the purpose of the building? Is it to house people, be a workplace, or to serve food? Who lives in or uses the building? And how would they decorate the place? Does the building have an interesting history? And how does that story show itself through the details? These are just the basics and you don't have to do anything beyond it, but if you're making something with lots of lore, you should lean heavily into decorating with story in mind. Functionality! As an almost exclusively creative player, I'm pretty oblivious to the fact that a good chunk of the people who watch tutorials like this one apply the tips and advice to builds made in survival. And when you don't have access to all the blocks in the entire universe, you certainly won't be making your kitchen floors out of netherite, unless you're like me and totally don't use Creative, which I know nothing about. I feel like most tutorials for furniture either are functional and slightly decorated, or entirely decorative with no function whatsoever, and there's no in between. Or is there? Well, survival players, this part's for you. But before I get into it, I have to make an important distinction. In the beginning of this video, I described it as vanilla friendly, and that does not mean survival friendly. Vanilla friendly encompasses everything you can do in vanilla, and that includes invisible item frames, barrier blocks, debug sticking, heads, and so on, while survival friendly is everything you can do in survival. This part, however, will be 100% survival friendly. There are a couple ways I like to go about making functional interiors, building around the function, and adding function to something already made. First, I'll be talking about building around the function. Building around the function is about building decoratively around the functional block, and typically what you do in survival, as then function comes first. So people who don't think about visual appeal whatsoever like to just place down the functional blocks compactly next to each other and do nothing more. But building around the function is about making the functional blocks as sparse as possible and filling the in-betweens with decorations that suit the theme and atmosphere to end up with something good looking that prioritizes functionality. As an example of this in practice, I'm gonna be turning these functional blocks, which are all related to cooking in some way, into 6x7 block kitchen. Right, so I think I'm going to start by deciding where stuff is going to go. The smokers, I'm going to place 2 of them just because one's not enough when you're playing survival. You need to eat. Maybe the crafting table could go here, and then the trash bin could, I don't know. And then I could have some sort of storage thing over here. And the shelves will just look nice up here. But the campfire, I think I'm going to move this bin to over here, and then have some sort of wood fire oven thing going on over here. Mangrove and spruce as my main blocks, and then bricks for this oven thingy. Mangrove shelves look really nice with bricks, so I'm just going to give it some shape with these. Okay. Now the brewing stand could maybe just go here, but these smokers look a bit bland, so I'm just going to give them some pressure plates. I don't know, stone or black stone. I'm indecisive, but alright, I'm just going to go with the black stone. And then some hoppers up here with some deep slate. Oh, yeah, that's looking nice. This composter needs a lid. Maybe spruce, not quite sure. Alright, spruce looks nice. Now over here, I think I'm going to create a cabinet of some sorts, just with the shelves and a couple of barrels. Oh yeah. So I've used almost all of these blocks now. I mean, apart from the chests, but I don't know if I am going to use these. Maybe I could do something like this. Or maybe just, yeah, I don't know. Okay, that looks kind of nice. There's a bit of variation and also some contrast because the spruce is way too repetitive. And here I'm going to add a sink with a cauldron and a lever as a faucet. This looks ugly, so I'm just going to cover it up with a trapdoor. This as well. Maybe some signs here would look cool just for some detail. Only issue with this now is that there's a lot of empty floor space and I think it needs a kitchen island. So I'm going to use the barrels once again because they have functionality. This by itself looks not that great, so I'm going to flip these because these actually have a really nice bottom texture. You don't need a debug deck to do this, it's just that I am lazy. Going to add some signs around this just to give it that cohesive red look. Now it's about time that I decorate. I'm just going to spam some small paintings around here and some plants would really improve this. Pressure plates look like plates and this one suits the theme that I've got going on. Now some candles would look great here. And the fish just because. And how could I forget the cake? This obviously needs a cake. This area is a bit dark, so I'm just going to add a lantern over here. Maybe I could do a different kind of lantern. I think I'm going to use the exposed copper just for these two to match. And some cups, which is just sea pickles. The only thing this is missing right now is for the storage to look like it's actually in use. So I am going to stock up these shelves with potatoes, cookies, bread, maybe baked potatoes, and I don't know, watermelon. Then I'm going to add a couple of item frames above here with some sort of potions just to make it look... Yeah, and then in here, I think this is done. Or do I need some more? Ooh, wildflowers. That looks nice. Okay, now it's done. And this looks fantastic. So we've got functionality in here as the storage space, here with the barrels, the campfire, and then the composter slash trash bin, crafting table so you can cook your food, brewing stand so you can make your drinks, smokers, a sink, and yeah. Adding function to something already made. Adding function to something already made is about adding functionality to something that's only decorative. Functionality can be a bit confining when it's thought about throughout the entire creative process, so I like to not think about it whatsoever, and if it's necessary, I add functionality to things after they're finished. As an example of this in practice, I'm gonna turn this barely functional kitchen into one that's basically survival friendly. I'm gonna start by replacing the furnace with a smoker because smokers are more apt for cooking, and then I'm also going to place one behind here just so that you can actually cook stuff in this. Wow, how awesome. And now these can become storage with the use of barrels. And since these things are supposed to be drawers, I'm going to replace them with barrels as well. Now, for the toaster, I'm just going to place a dispenser filled with bread behind this. Wait, so, it's right here, so the dispenser should be here. And I'm going to device this so that it's... Oh, I almost forgot to fill it with bread. This is pretty hard to use, but if you... Ooh, fuck yeah, I've got bread! And I have to rotate the head once again. Now I could add a crafting table behind this dishwasher just so we can get a crafting area in here. Now for the fridge, I'm just going to go with a classic dispenser behind iron door fridge. I'm just going to fill this with carrots because I love carrots, best vegetable to ever exist. For this area, I'm going to place a barrel behind here and fill that with some sort of stew or soup or something, mushroom stew. If you right click this, you can get your good soup. I'm going to replace these with shelves just so that I can store something. I'm thinking apples. And over here, I'm just going to add some chests behind the shelf so that you can actually store stuff in it. The thing is, I need to add some logs behind this just so that it doesn't look bald. Double chests here and then two singular ones, double chest, two singular ones. This is looking really nice. Only thing I'm missing is somewhere to make the drinks, so I can't place it right here, I can't place it here, all the space is occupied, so it's just going to have to be up here. I honestly cannot think of anything else to add to this now. We've got the fridge, drawers, functional toaster, which I'm not going to try to use even because it's so hard, cupboards, smoker, shelves, crafting table, wood fire oven, and some storage. These tips in practice. So far there's been infinite number of minutes of yapping, so now I'm gonna show you what these tips can look like in practice from start to finish by furnishing this house. And to really challenge my creative mode conditioned brain, I'll be trying to add as much functionality to it as possible and make it 100% survival friendly, which means no invisible item frames. I am going to... So this is what the inside of the house looks like. It's pretty empty at the moment, but that will soon change because we are going to start by looking at some inspiration. I've made this pinboard to just get a rough feeling of the vibe and what I kind of want to go for. There are some recurring colors here that I will be getting back to later, but this is kind of the vibe. And I also made this short playlist just to, you know, get into the mood. I always like to listen to 1 or 2 songs on repeat when I build stuff. I find that it really helps with the cohesiveness of everything I'm making. Now on to planning. There are 3 floors in this. There's the top floor, the first floor, and then the basement. And the roofs are 3 blocks tall, 4 blocks, and then 4.5 blocks. And I'll be making this in 1:1 scale, give or take, artistic freedom, you know. I have no plans whatsoever of making these walls 2 blocks thick because no way I'm doing that. But I'm going to make a layer of trapdoors down here in the basement on the roof just because I want to change the color of the kitchen floor. As much as I do hate open floor plans, I really do not hate them when the space that's being worked with is small, which it is here, so there is not really much I can do in terms of, you know, making rooms here in the first floor at least. But up here in the second floor, I want this to be a bathroom just because it feels more secluded, you know, the windows aren't too huge. And then I want this to be a bigger bedroom. I only want this house to have 1 bedroom. Only issue is staircase. I want the kitchen to be right here. I want this to be dining area and then the living room over here. But then there's no space for the stairs. I could use a ladder, but I don't feel like it suits the aesthetic of this house. But you know what I could do? I could just add another part to the house. Because fun fact, you can actually do that. So now I gotta decide what kind of staircase I want. I might go with a spiral staircase just because of the shape of this. I mean, it's literally circular. Then I just gotta figure out how I'm going to connect this part to this part, which will take quite some time. The underside of this staircase could use that as down storage or something. Okay, never mind. This spiral thing really isn't going to work.
Never mind, I actually made it work. It just took me 10 minutes.
Holy shit, I actually did this. I'm also going to just add a wall here really quickly. I do not want this to be completely sectioned off like the bathroom just because it would make the place feel way too cramped. So kind of an arch thing going on here. Make this a little bit lower, just like so. Feels cozier this way. But since this is the bathroom, it's obviously going to have a door, which I'll add later. I'm also going to clean up these windows a bit. Also these edges, I honestly don't know what I was doing here when I made this. So now that the planning is done, let's start with the block palettes, texturing and gradients. First up, I'll be going back to my inspiration just to take a look at the colors that keep coming up in these. Since I've already decided that the floor is going to be light, these darker colors could make for some really nice accents. There appears to be a lot of greens and some pink, a little bit of yellow, just bright colors that feel lively. I'm just going to place down a quick block palette so that I don't get too overwhelmed when it comes to the furnishing part. I do not know exactly what I'm going for, but you know, I'm just feeling the vibe. I'll just place these out here. Hopefully I don't forget about them, but we'll see. I also have to texture, and for the texturing I'm going to use oak planks and stripped oak logs. These blocks work so well with beehives. They provide just the right amount of contrast, and they also it just works, you know, like look at this. Out of all these 3 blocks that I'm using on the floor, oak is the darkest in value, so I am going to use this as the people have walked here the most block. I do not want to go too overboard with the texturing because I do not want this to look extremely old. If you're using a block like beehives or chiseled bookshelves as the floor, it can also be nice to create a kind of smooth transition if you're using a normal wood as the stair block. This also applies to all the functional blocks in general. So if we take a look at the lodestones, for example, like you obviously don't have lodestone stairs. So if we were to use these with stairs, then maybe something like andesite or polished andesite could work, because polished andesite is consistent in both texture and color. It's a little bit darker in value, so that's also why we kind of want to blend it out a bit. I don't think I'm going to add any physical texture to this though. But down in the basement, however, oh, this is really dark. I am just going to light this up real quick. Anyway, I want to use tuff as the floor down here, but I definitely want it to look more worn down than the top floors. I'm going to texture it, and for this I'm going to go back to the functional blocks, because here we have blast furnaces and then polished deep slate. So I am just going to, you know. Now, where have people walked the most? I am going to start by placing the darkest block in the gradient. Most of the movement down here has definitely happened in the middle of the room, so that's the place that I'm going to make the darkest. And then I'm going to smooth this out with the blast furnace. I'm going to add some physical texture too. Buttons are always great as pebbles and rocks. And while I'm at the gradients, I'm also going to texture this oak and this spruce down here with some mangrove and stripped dark oak. Where the fuck? Okay, there. If you want places to look weathered or worn down, you should really start texturing the wood. This is something that not enough people think about. It can be such a nice change. I also need to break up the living space. I'm also going to make the kitchen floor a bit different. I might actually use diorite for this because I'm feeling evil. And I think I'm going to use tuff here too. I'm also going to texture this with some bone blocks, blast furnaces. Now onto visual weight and space. Since this space is relatively small, I'm going to place all of the furniture up against the walls. I mean, apart from tables, maybe. I will start by placing down some placeholder blocks. Yellow's going to be furniture and pink is going to be, I don't know. I want there to be a small dining table here. Maybe this could be a plant and a bookshelf to, you know, break up the room properly, and the fireplace is going to be here. I already had this planned out when I started building this house. I want this bookshelf to go up to the roof, and I think that could be a nice way of breaking this into rooms without actually creating walls. And I want a small cute corner couch here, maybe another plant. I don't even know what I'm doing with these colors. Okay, you'll just have to deal with it. And then maybe a toilet, bathtub of some sorts, and a sink and some bathroom storage. I want the bed to be here, almost a canopy bed kind of thing. This could be a desk, and then this will maybe be storage or something. I am not sure. Down here, however, I want almost all the space to be occupied by the functional blocks, because like I said, this is going to be something that you could make hypothetically into Rival. I want a cartography table of some sort over here. This could maybe be a place for some armor stands. This could be furnaces or chests, I'm not sure, or maybe just something. The point I'm trying to make here is this is already compact. I am not going to place anything in the middle of the room. That's only for big spaces. I also don't want there to be too much repetition in this house. The only thing I really want to repeat is the towels. I want to have the same one down here as up in the bathroom. So yeah, that's it. Now on to furniture. I sometimes like to plan out the furniture that I'm going to use, but since this is so small and it won't be too complex, it's just something that I'm going to go right into. I think I'm going to use a bit of smooth sandstone because this has a really beautiful, you know, creamish color. And to retain the functionality of these chairs, quote-unquote chairs, I won't be placing a full block here. I'll maybe use an anvil or something. Over here, I'll maybe make a potted plant. I was thinking something like this, but it's too visually heavy. It's so vertical and it's so just big. If everything else were built at a bigger scale, this could work, but it is not, so nope. I am just going to plant a normal azalea, I think. Okay. Now this bookshelf, I'm just going to... You know what? I am really not feeling this this idea. Maybe I'll just replace it with a shelf, because shelves are pretty good at breaking up spaces without taking up too much space. Now for this fireplace, I'm just going to use a campfire with some trapdoors on the sides. I always gotta remember to use the waxed copper trapdoors and not the... So I always double check that I'm using the waxed exposed instead of the just exposed copper trapdoors. Maybe adding a sign could... Okay, no. That is abysmal. I could maybe use a wall and stair block for this. I am not sure. I really do not like what smoke is doing right now. Okay, this could be something. If I can go like this and then use a shelf on the sides. Ooh. I'm going to place copper golems on the sides just because it keeps the theme consistent. Like you can see here, I've used dark oak and then dark oak, then exposed copper and then even more exposed copper. I could add a sign up here too, maybe spruce. I feel like you can never really go wrong with spruce. It's just the safest block to build with. I kind of want to make the kitchen now. And I'm going to start with the... I almost looked up fridge in the search bar. I meant to type iron block. Because as we all know, iron blocks are fridges. This is really close to the fireplace. Like, no, this is unacceptable. So I'm going to move it to over here. An iron door, and then I am going to go with the... Wait, these copper blocks are trying to gaslight me. I'm going to use this as a sink and also countertop. Maybe I'll move it to here, and then this can be the furnace. And I'm also going to make this design that I saw on Pinterest somewhere. This is consistent with the theming of this, which I definitely love. And then here on the sides, I can maybe just, I don't know, use some shelves. I also really want cupboards, so I am just going to place some barrels down, and then I can have something on top here. Now a tripwire hook as the faucet, because duh. Okay, this is looking pretty alright. I honestly think I'm just going to spam these shelves around. I actually love this box so much, but here, I'm going to make some sort of closet, I think. With an armor stand, because functionality! You heard me when I said I was going to make this functional. Chisel bookshelves kind of look like shoe shelves. I know this isn't a stretch, like you see it too, right? I'm going to place one up here too, and then I'll use a birch trapdoor to block this off. And another really cute idea I got was to... Now out here, I am maybe going to... Scaffolding. Scaffolding works as a really nice just filler block. When you don't know what to place somewhere, just place a scaffolding with a plant or something on top. Now over to this area. I think I want this couch to have smooth sandstone. Okay, I really like beige. Another way that I'm going to separate these rooms from each other is by giving this living room a rug. Green, probably. I don't know how I feel about having the rug this close to the fireplace. It just feels wrong. Okay, like this. Nah, brown. Yeah, brown. If you're into building or you watch building tutorials, you've definitely heard the word depth thrown around a lot, and depth doesn't just apply to exteriors, it also applies to interiors. So here you can see that I haven't just placed the carpet down normally, but I've used wool under it to give it that depth. And this also lets you place blocks on top that aren't full blocks, like a shelf, for example, without having it disrupt the entire thing. Let's go back to the basics. A fence with a pressure plate on top. But I honestly feel like this is too spruce dominant, so I'm going to replace it with dark oak. I also want this to have a cat tower maybe, because there's a cat outside. He's actually my cat, he's fat and he likes to eat and likes to steal food and he's evil and he's full of hatred. I'm just going to use the scaffolding again with a chain on top. Does this look like a cat bed? No, it does not look like a cat bed, but if I replace the underside of this with a carpet in another color than brown to, you know, properly separate it from the rug carpet thing, whatever you want to call it. Cyan, maybe. Nah, yellow. Yellow feels very bright and, you know, colorful. And before I head upstairs, I'm just going to add some light to this. I am a huge lover of lanterns, but they're kind of basic. But one of my favorite ways to make them more interesting is by just placing some sort of block over them and then placing signs around them. Like, it just looks great. I'll also have to strategically place rugs over here though, but it is so worth it because look at this. I think the first floor is done. Now let's head upstairs. So first up, I want this to be a desk area. I am going back with the dark oak just because it looks nice. And maybe some sandstone again. But this time I will use a shelf as the back of the chair. Birch and sandstone look really nice together. And then this is going to be the bed. I might make it green or I might make it brown or might make it light gray or dark gray or blue or purple or pink or orange. You know, that's when you head back to the inspiration. Okay, so... Okay, the bed's going to be green. Okay. A ladder on the side and maybe... You know what? Fuck it. I'll add another shelf. This can be... I think I'll make it a closet or something. Placeholder block things. You know, tiny rug and then a laptop. If you're making laptops, just know that the meditative painting looks, it really looks like a laptop background. The white mouse. I don't know what else there is to add in here for now. Maybe some sort of banner thing over the bed, just to frame it. Beige stripes. So to make these banners with beige stripes, I just add a white banner with some brown palette. And then I do the same thing with white over it. And wow, look at that. Okay, yeah, that's alright. You know, it feels secluded and cozy and nice. And you also have this beautiful view of the beautiful nature. I know I just placed the loom here to make the banners, but I kind of like the look of this, so I'm just going to keep it. Now I'm just going to make something here in the hallway to fill in this empty, bald space. It can't be planned in here because there's no sunlight, so it just looks out of place and awkward. But it also can't be something too grand because then it also feels misplaced. Back with the scaffolding again. I also need to give this hallway light because it's too dark. One up here maybe. Oh shit. I'll just use chains. I'll be alright. You do not know how badly I just want to place a lantern up here somewhere and then connect it to a stair with a debug stick right now. But I am going to keep things survival friendly because I love the survival players. Okay, I have so much respect for you. I'm just going to replace these with shelves because I have something in the back of my mind. Now over to the bathroom. I want this to have a bathtub, but I don't know how I'm going to go about this. I would have to do something like this to cover up the ugly beams. So yeah, this is definitely working. Only issue is, am I really going to be okay with people having water drip on their foreheads because they're sitting under a bathtub? I kind of do not care, if I'm going to be completely honest. You know, water damage is only like, it's an aesthetic. It just adds to the vibe, you know. I really do not like this, but what else is there to do? Do trapdoors work on this? Holy fuck, I might have to I'll just remove this with one block. But then that also looks awkward because it should be placed right over the fucking table. Okay, I'll just get rid of these things around it and place it with a hopper lantern that's consistent with the colors in this. I think a heart drawer would be really cute here. And then a trapdoor for some depth. Sometimes when I haven't looked at something in a while, I just see it again and I think, oh my gosh, that's so ugly. So yeah, I just had to add some detail to this. That's so much nicer. Now I will just have to create a mirror. To make the mirror, I'm just going to add a white bent sinister, some white gradient, I guess, and then a blue on the bottom. Oh, and then a brown border. Whoa. There's also going to be water dripping down here, I believe. So I'm just going to add trapdoors to this too. I'm going to give this some shape with some signs, some shelves as just detail. And then this obviously needs a toilet, which I'm going to make with some smooth quartz and an iron trapdoor. And a tripwire hook as a faucet for the bathtub. What else is there to add? Maybe a rug of some sort. I also want to add a rug by the entrance here. Now I just have to furnish the basement, and I'm honestly getting pretty tired of this, so I'm just going to spam functional blocks, I guess. Cartography table, that can go there. Spruce wood to accompany that. Armor stands. Also create some variation in the height of these things. Like this one can be down on the floor, and then this one's on a slab, you see? Awesome, epic. Maybe a bit of this? I'm not sure. Oh no. Okay. And this also needs a chair, and I think I'm going to go with a spruce one down here because this basement feels more rustic. I'm just going to use torches as lighting here because I am not gonna bother with anything else. With item frames, not invisible ones, because this is supposed to be survival friendly, and some anvils. And speaking of anvils, I'm just going to place one down right here, and then some chests, because, you know, storage and stuff. Maybe a pile of barrels over here. Now I'm just going to move this anvil to here, and then this can be the chest block. What other functional blocks are there? Crafting table, stone cutter, smithing table, of course. I clearly know what these different blocks do. Crafting table, stone cutters. Okay, I honestly just do not care anymore. I just want to get this done. And then furnaces in here. That feels way too cramped, so I'm just going to build into this wall. Thankfully there are leaves behind here to, you know, cover it up, because nope, that is ugly. And I'm going to section off this area with some stairs to create an arch. Now, time for some detailing / storytelling. So I want this place to have a cozy, kind of artistic vibe to it. I'm going to start by, you know, filling this up with books. I could place some honey in this shelf right here, and buttons. I don't know what to put in these, or if they're purely decorative or what they are, but this place could really use some hanging plants. When you're making hanging plants, it's really important that they actually touch the chains, because otherwise it'll just look weird and awkward. Maybe some candles and some sort of drink up here. Paintings. I almost forgot to add paintings. I'll also add item frames while I'm at it, because item frames can work really well as kind of paintings in places where normal 1x1 paintings would look awkward. So like here, for example, having this here makes it look like almost a part of the door, because there's no space between the painting and the actual door. But with the item frames, we get these 2 pixels, and they really do a lot. Maybe with a cherry sapling, going to add a jukebox to this so that I can fill the shelf up with discs. Just like so. I do kind of want to add some paintings to this still. I'm just going to spam some paintings around. You can never really go wrong with this. Okay, that placement is kind of extremely awkward, but yeah. And then in the second floor too, we need some paintings. In the bedroom, I could place one up here and then one here. I don't even care if they're repeating anymore. I just want to finish this. With a loom, I'm just going to, I don't know, have some sort of drawer looking thing here. And shampoo bottles too. And some other candles in this thing that kind of look like beauty products. This also needs a light. And a door, holy fuck. I'll use dark oak for this too. What lighting blocks are there? Chain and a lantern. But where am I going to place it? Because there isn't too much space. Okay, I feel like that's an okay placement. Now for the bedroom, I think I'm going to do something similar. And now, fairy lights. Colored fairy lights. Thank you to the person who invented this. I don't know who you are or where you are right now, but I owe you my life. Okay, maybe I'll place a bell here. Flint and steel. This could maybe be a chair or something. Alright, a quick note on visual weight. In here, the roof doesn't feel too tall, even though it's 4.5 blocks, which is about 4.5 meters. In here, it feels way taller because of how slim the walls are. Floor height isn't just about, oh, it's this many blocks tall or this many blocks tall. It's also about proportionality, and this feels very vertical, so I've placed this painting here to balance it out, I guess. Here it's also important that the painting isn't placed too far up, like this for example, because you won't really be able to see it when it's this cramped in here. Now I'm just going to go around and, oh wait, crystals. If I look at the details in the inspiration photos, a recurring thing is flowers, you know, floral patterns, flower things. So I will be using some flowers in these shelves just to keep up with the theme. Up here too, I think this could be really cute. Wait, no, that's too repetitive. I did not want this to be repetitive. Maybe I'll just use this as normal storage shelves. But then I gotta find something to store in it, and I don't know what you would store in a shelf placed in this sort of way. Ooh, clock. Wait, I don't have any clocks yet. I might add one up here to the desk area because it's just a natural place to place a clock, you know. I also just realized that the floor isn't really textured here, but I also do not want to mess with the roof and have to redo all those lamps. No way I'm doing that. I actually think I might be finished. Let's just take a quick look at everything and see how things are looking. I do want paintings in this stairway. And then down here, I'm going to make this cartography desk look like a place where things are actually being stored. So I will be using a couple of shelves here, maybe just one. And what would you store maybe here? A candle can be like a black candle would be... Okay, now this is definitely finished. Now get ready for a house tour. Let's head inside. Okay, so this is the entrance. Here we got some storage. This is the kitchen, and I forgot about functionality. I feel like there's much more functionality to add to this. Interiors are difficult. It's hard with the scale and all that, but nobody's born with the skill of making good interiors in Minecraft, and there's no way you can get better without trying. Proof? Well, here's an interior I made almost 7 years ago. And here's one I made 2 years ago. It's better, but the proportionality is still diabolical. But ultimately, none of this matters. You don't need beautiful interiors to survive. You might as well make a grey concrete block and optimize its functionality, because, you know, we only need to survive. We don't need all this extra beautification bullshit, is what I would say if I was on the lower end of the bell curve. But we live for beauty and we die for beauty. A lot of what we do and make serves no function, but what is life if stripped of what we live for? And what is creativity if not to be enjoyed? So go create something good, create something bad, just create something. Hey, thank you for watching. Subscribe, I guess. More tutorials coming soon.